What if a US president could decide, with the stroke of a pen, who is and isn't an American citizen? That's the constitutional debate that reached the US Supreme Court. And the court's answer could shape American politics for years to come. But here is a twist. The fight wasn't really just about immigration. It was about whether the constitutional or the president has the right or the final word. Let's unpack what happened. The controversy began when President Trump tried to end birthright citizenship through an executive order. Birthright citizenship means that in general, anyone born on US soil automatically becomes an American citizen. Supporters of Trump's move argue that the policy encourages illegal immigration and so-called birth tourism. Opponents say the Constitution doesn't allow a president to rewrite citizenship rules through executive action, so the issue landed before the highest court in the country. And after months of anticipation, the Supreme Court ruled 6-3 that birthright citizenship remains protected under the 14th Amendment. In other words, the executive order failed. But why is this amendment so important? To understand yesterday's ruling, you actually have to travel back more than 150 years. The 14th Amendment wasn't written because of immigration. It was introduced because of slavery. After the Civil War ended in 1865, millions of formerly enslaved black Americans needed legal recognition as citizens. Just a few years earlier, in the Dred Scott decision of 1857, the Supreme Court had ruled that black people could never be US citizens. That decision became one of the darkest chapters in American legal history. After slavery was abolished through the 13th Amendment, Congress passed the Civil Rights Act. And then, in 1968, the 14th Amendment permanently established a simple but powerful principle. People born in the United States are citizens. That constitutional guarantee has remained in place ever since. But there is another case that you would probably have never heard of, yet it changed American history. In 1898, the Supreme Court decided in the case of United States versus Wong Kim Ark. Wong Kim Ark was born in San Francisco to Chinese parents who lived legally in America but couldn't become citizens because of the discriminatory laws at that time. After traveling overseas, he was denied re-entry because officials claimed he wasn't an American citizen. He challenged the government. The Supreme Court ruled in his favor, but he had been born on American soil and he was a US citizen under the 14th Amendment. The case became the legal foundation for modern birthright citizenship, and in the latest ruling, the Supreme Court relied heavily on that precedent. Chief Justice John Roberts' opinion rejected the Trump administration's arguments. According to the ruling, the president cannot override the Constitution through executive action. The Constitution reaffirmed that the promise contained in the 14th Amendment still applies today. For supporters of the decision, this was seen as a victory for constitutional limits on presidential power, but that certainly wasn't the end of the debate. Here is where things become politically explosive. Many Republican lawmakers call the ruling one of the worst Supreme Court decisions in recent history. President Trump responded by arguing that Congress, not the courts, could still change the law through legislation. Some conservatives also pointed to opinions from justices who suggested that Congress may have room to legislate on aspects of citizenship policy. However, others argued that even if Congress acted, the Supreme Court would likely review any such law again. So while the executive order failed, the political fight is far from over. The broader debate now goes beyond constitutional language. Supporters of birthright citizenship argue that citizenship should depend on where someone is born and not on the immigration status of their parents. They say that is exactly what the 14th Amendment was designed to protect. Critics disagree. They argue the amendment was originally intended to address the status of formerly enslaved people, not illegal immigration. They also claim birthright citizenship can encourage unauthorized immigration and birth tourism. In other words, both sides agree the Constitution matters. They simply disagree about what it actually means. Public opinion reflects that divide. According to polling mentioned during the discussion, Americans remain sharply split over whether children born in the United States to undocumented immigrants should automatically receive citizenship. At the same time, there is overwhelming agreement that children born to U.S. parents or parents who legally immigrated should be American citizens. So even after the court's decision, the issue remains politically sensitive. Legal experts interviewed after the ruling also highlighted another important point. Some argued this decision protects the constitutional balance by preventing presidents from changing fundamental rights through executive orders. Others countered that the court may eventually revisit the issue, especially as future Congresses consider new immigration laws. Even among constitutional lawyers, there is no consensus about whether this chapter is truly closed. So, what did the Supreme Court really decide? It didn't end America's immigration debate. It didn't settle every legal argument. What it did say was something much narrower, but enormously significant. A president cannot simply rewrite constitutional citizenship through executive order, and whether Congress will try to change the law, whether future courts revisit the issue, and whether this becomes a defining issue in future elections, these questions remain unanswered. But one thing is certain, the battle over who gets to call America home is far from over. Thank you.